been attending it, so it's a learning curve for me, and it will be nice to be introduced to you as we proceed with the meeting. So welcome you all here. Do we have any apologies?
Yes, Chair, we have apologies from Thomas Glenn and Sheena Devlin.
Thanks very much. As we go around, I don't think there's quite a few of us here. We'll just introduce ourselves as we speak. So I'm Grant Lane, leader of Perth Kinross Council, and looking forward to working with you to benefit everybody within our communities. The only person I will ask to introduce themselves just now is Mr. McLaren, and if you could just give us an update of his background and how he came to be here, I'd appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. Very happy to be here. My name's Dougie McLaren. I work in the Scottish Government. I'm a Deputy Director. I lead on the annual budget process and public sector pay policy. So I've been designated the Government's Place Director for Perth and Kinross, which is a bit of an evolution of the previous Location Director role that we used to have. And I suppose, as with any newbies, I will be listening intently and finding my way and getting up to speed on a few things. So very happy to be here, and thank you.
Thanks very much, Mr. McLaren. Do we have any declarations of interest today? Oh, thank you. And we have a note of the last board meeting. Can we accept that, or are there any comments on that note? Okay, thank you. So we'll move on to paper 4, which is the local outcome improvement plan. And I think that's going to be introduced by Fiona Robertson.
Thanks very much, Chair. Colleagues, we've got some slides because we thought it might be helpful just to summarise briefly where we are with the local outcome improvement plan. A lot of work, as many of you know, over the last few months on this. You've all been sent the current draft document, and this is just the digested read of that. Hopefully particularly helpful for Dougie's benefit and other new board members. So we're going to just briefly, thanks Lee, we're just going to briefly recap on the strategic priorities, summarise after that in particular the key actions that the local outcome improvement plan commits us to doing in the first delivery year. And those of you who were involved from the outset of this process will remember that we started writing this new plan in the immediate aftermath, still in the foothills of COVID. And we were very clear, I think, that the focus of the board needed to be around recovery in the short, medium and long term from the impact of COVID. And since then, a number of challenges, and they are equalities challenges, cost of living, increase in poverty and child poverty, all of these things have come into play as well. So I'm sure we would all agree that it's absolutely imperative that once we have signed up to this plan, we are able to kind of hit the ground running in the first delivery period, the first 12 months, and crack on with things. So we'll just recap a little bit of what's currently in the draft in relation to the priority actions. So a little bit on issues and risks, and then Chair, I suggest we just open it up for questions. Lee, could you just go on to the next slide? Thank you. So just a brief recap there on our new strategic priorities. I appreciate these will be relatively recent for those of you who've just joined the board, but for everybody else, these are things that we've been talking about for quite a long time now. And whether you're relatively new to the CPP or whether you've been working with us for a while, I think we can probably all agree that these are no-brainers. They are absolute no-brainers, bearing in mind the challenges that we face across our localities and within our communities of interest. I do want to just flag briefly again here, although we've said it before, a big thank you to Gordon McDougall, who led a short life working group of community planning partners starting a couple of years ago, unbelievably, to formulate these 5 strategic priorities, which are really the spine, the backbone of the new local outcome improvement plan. Just pause, if you could just pause there for me, Lee, thank you. Are there any questions or comments on the strategic priorities before I go on, or are we all collectively agreed that they're still the right ones? Not seeing any hands, which is good. Okay, thank you, Lee. Thumbs up there. Is that you, Yvonne? Thank you. Nice to see you. As I was saying a moment ago, you know, if any of this is going to have meaning, we need to kind of get it off the runway pretty quickly after the plan is approved. And I'll come back at the end to the governance route from here in terms of final approval by this board and also by the council in terms of its interest as a community planning partner, and other community planning partners will want to think about when you take the plan to your boards, if you haven't already had that discussion. But Lee has just helpfully summarised here some of the key actions for the next 12 months of the Community Planning Partnership. Not all of them, by all means. They are set out in the action plan, which is the appendix to the main document. But for each of the 5 priorities, some of the things that we will either get underway or are already underway to get some momentum going. Are there any questions on that? Or Lee, are there any comments? Lee and David, anything you want to flag up in particular, because you've been working with partners to develop these?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, we've got a number of actions in the LOIP. I think there's you know, what are the ones that we ensure we want to get behind and deliver. I think there's a little bit still to do in the LOIP, colleagues, in terms of measuring the impacts of these and the performance measurements. If you might want to say a little bit more about that in the presentation. But I think, you know, we're at a point now where the action plan is pretty, you know, it's okay for us. It's going to do what we need it to do in the short term. But I think, you know, there's still some questions about just the priorities within the priorities.
Yvonne.
Thank you, Fiona. Nice to see you too, and hello, colleagues. It's just a question around the employability objective and the resources column, where it says within existing. And apologies, I am a guest, a deputy here today, so this has maybe been clearly articulated, but my understanding is that there's obviously no one left behind investment come through to the local authority through the local employability partnership. So I suppose it's just a point for clarification why that would state within existing rather than additional investment that's come through.
Yeah, it's purely as a result of what you've just said, Yvonne, that resource is available. So it's been classed as existing as opposed to something that we're expecting to come in, if that makes sense.
Right, okay, no, that's helpful. Thanks very much.
And I think I mean, from memory, because we did some earlier work with your help on sort of similar issues a few years ago, didn't we, Yvonne? But I think this is really about, from the individual's perspective, making it as straightforward as possible to get routes into work. And it's more about how we join up that pathway of support for individuals, and how different community planning partners are working at different points in the system. It is the no wrong door approach, rather than necessarily throwing additional financial or other resource at this priority at the moment, although that might change, of course.
Can I just say that, as we can't see everybody on the screen, if anybody wants to raise a question or an answer or any comment, can they just feed it into the chat and I'll be able to pick up that way? Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Lee. Go on. Just want to touch on some of the issues and risks, and again, it would be helpful to get colleagues' own reflections and thoughts about some of these. And we've had discussion about all of them, you know, as we've gone along the road. That first one there is there because I think we all know that we operate in a complicated landscape. There was a recommendation, I think, from Audit Scotland the last time they took a look at community planning at a national level around, you know, how can you make this simpler for the different statutory partners in particular, who have got statutory targets for which they are accountable, often directly to ministers, and how do we make the community planning landscape kind of stand out and legible within all of that. David and I recently contributed to a visit from the oversight group, which is looking at the recommendations from the Strang report into mental health services, and we were talking to the chair of that group about community planning here in Perth and Kinross and how it works and how we are building mental health and wellbeing into our priorities for the new plan. And she made the point, and I thought I found this really valuable feedback. Jackie may want to comment too, that, you know, we've got some excellent strategies and plans in Perth and Kinross. You know, we've got a really solid child poverty action plan. For example, our approach to understanding affordable housing need and housing quality standard within the council is really strong. We've got a very well integrated adult learning and community development offer, etc., etc., etc. But Fiona Lease was reminding us, you know, for the community planning board, the key question is, what's the added value that the CPP brings? What is it that this board can do? And you are a set of we as officers are here to advise you, but you are a set of very powerful senior people and politicians, and your leadership will be critical in making the plan, the local outcome improvement plan, a success. And that's got to be, I would suggest, about what it is that the CPP can do that only it can do. The other issues and risks there, again, some of these will not be a surprise. Cost of living. What is it that we as a CPP can influence in terms of making life more straightforward for the people and communities that we're here to serve? What can we control? What are the things that we can neither influence nor control? And how do we focus on mitigating cost of living crisis using the tools and the resources that we have at our disposal, which are quite significant collectively? A particular challenge, and I was thinking about this and talking to the team about it, specifically in the context of poverty, although it applies to some of the other priorities as well, is there are a number of really, really important discretionary funds that are being offered at a national level. So period dignity, this community planning partnership has done a huge amount of work on that. There's funding going to improve physical well-being, particularly focused on areas of deprivation, which is being channeled through Sport Scotland. Jackie Pepper was mentioning discretionary funds that are going through the Integrated Children and Young People's Partnership. All of these things are good and welcome. But again, I think the trick for the CPP is about how we join them up. And again, thinking about that from the perspective of the individual, the family, the neighbourhood, and how we bring those funds to bear holistically to improve outcomes, which is one of those things that's very easy to talk about around a board table and very difficult to do. But I think we must try and do it. Mental health and wellbeing, I'm not going to say any more about that. Others are far more competent than me, but clearly, you know, we are all aware of the challenges and the demand pressures around that. And finally, a more specific thing around work that the CPP board has previously agreed as priorities within the priorities. We have some real challenges in Cooper Angus at the moment on a variety of fronts. And similarly, but different challenges in South Crieff. So we've got area of kind of special focus from the CPP going on in those two localities, and we need to keep up momentum in those areas whilst also not losing sight of all the other plates that we as a CPP have to spin. It's easy. It's easy. Next slide. And that's the final slide. So just to hand back to you, Chair, and we just suggested some questions there to keep us right, because what Lee, David and I will be doing together with the Executive Officer Group, the CPOG, over the next couple of months is hopefully doing a final sense check of the local outcome improvement plan, just final tuning it up before it comes back to this board in September for approval and sign off, and it would also subsequently go to full council for sign off, and there will be engagement that council officers will be doing with the new administration during recess around these priorities and where they align with the council's corporate priorities. And individual CP partners will want to do the same, I'm sure, with their own boards or elected representatives as appropriate. So I think the questions for us, but there may be others, are first of all, most obviously, the first 12 months, are we focused on the right things? And have we got the right level of priority attached to the different actions that we're going to be committed to delivering from September, October 2022 onwards? Second one there, and I appreciate we're not going to crack this around this table this morning, colleagues, but joint resourcing. We've talked about a lot in the past. There are priorities within the local outcome improvement plan that matter to all of us. And where actually, if we are prepared to pool money, co-locate into buildings, share skills, be more interchangeable about staffing and the other assets that we have at our disposal, we could actually get a much bigger bang for our buck. So what do we want to do about that collectively? Thirdly, are we confident as a CPP that we have sufficient strategic overview of risk? Because as a board, you are here to hold the individual community planning partners and officers to account for delivery of the plan. And what we would do normally in other circumstances is we would have a risk profile and we would take a regular look at that. We would be able to therefore know where we're making good progress, where we're broadly on track and where things are slipping. And you as a board have the power to take action, make decisions to mitigate risk. And final point as well is, this is a good board, a strong board. I think the membership has changed over the years that I've been working with it, but the strength of the relationships, I think, has always been a constant. And we did see that particularly during COVID. But I think there is a question for us about how do we have the adult conversations and hold ourselves to account through the chair for the difference that we're making. So a few questions that you might want to think about, talk about, and you will have others. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much, Fiona. Thanks. I've got a comment, but I've got a question first from Laurie Hughes. Laurie, could you just, as every speaker speaks for the first time, just give tell us who you are, etc., please, for people who do not know. And then you can ask a question. Thanks.
No problem. Thanks, Chair. My name's Laurie Hughes and I'm the Interim Chief Executive at PCABS in Perth. Ordinarily, I would be the Partnership and Communities Manager, so have the leadership for the third sector interface and strategic oversight over the Minority Communities Hub. My question really is about whether we as a collective, we as a partnership feel that we're capturing intersectionality appropriately in the LOIP. There's so much come out in terms of evidence this week from the likes of Christians Against Poverty, from GRF, the Trussell Trust and Action for Children, around the linkages between poverty and mental health. And having a look at the LOIP this morning, I'm not sure that that's necessarily reflected. So I guess as a collective, my question is, how do we make sure that those intersectional elements are represented in the LOIP?
That's a question to throw into the colleagues.
Okay. Within the board, what are the views on Laurie's question from people who are involved in this at every different level? I was like, Provost McDade, I'll just call you Xander. You're Xander in this meeting, I'm afraid.
That's fine, thank you, Mr. Leader. Yeah, hi, I'm Xander McDade. I am the provost in the council, but I'm quite happy to call Xander. I think Laurie raises a really good point, actually, and I think this is something that I think we perhaps should be looking at as we're reconsidering priorities in the council as well, around how we're capturing a lot of, and I think what Laurie raised in terms of intersectionality is quite important. But I think there's a wider issue here as well about how we are ensuring that those voices are being heard through our decision making. We are, as Fiona said, a very important group of people in terms of decision making in our respective organisations and collectively. And sometimes it's quite easy for us to all get groupthink, but actually we need to be ensuring that that's rooted in what is going on in the wider world. So I think I would quite like to see some discussion about this going forward. I think obviously I've been on the community planning partnership briefly before, but actually I feel I'm still quite new to it and would like to have a bit of time to consider some of the stuff before we have some of these conversations and just sort of see how we might take some of that forward. But I think it's definitely a conversation that we should be having.
Thanks, Xander. You sure?
Yeah. No, I mean, it's a good point, Laurie. And as I always say, people don't live their lives in silos, and you know, when we're looking at mental well-being and employability and digital skills, you know, if we drill that down into a certain area or any kind of group, then it's likely to be the same people experiencing a number of those things. I guess what we've got to do is we've got to cut the cake, if you like, somehow and present the LOIP. But I think that's why we've been quite tenacious, if you like, in terms of, you know, ensuring that the actions that we put in our partnership actions are not business as usual, so that, you know, we are looking at you know, a number of organisations working together to deliver the actions and therefore hopefully hitting a number of groups. But you're right, if we can, you know, if we can sort out maximise people's income, for example, then that would probably improve mental well-being, you know, improve confidence, etc. So.
Okay, thanks, David. Fiona.
Yeah, and then you've I can see Barbara wants to come in as well, but I think you know, we've talked about this at various stages at the CPOG as well, Laurie, and you're absolutely right. I also think, I mean, for me, there are two kind of immediate things. There are lots of things that we need to do to kind of tackle that issue. One is around how, and I alluded to it, I think, in the presentation, is around the data and evidence that we use and gather to actually understand what's going on in our communities and where some of those intersectionality issues are most important in terms of how we design and deliver services. I think, though, the other point, and Xander's touched on this, is about the balance of representation, actually, and whose voices are heard in the community planning context, and the local action partnerships, which it's no secret, you know, we will be reviewing over the course of the next few months, and how effective they have been as instruments of participative democracy, and who's active in them and who, as importantly, is not active in them, I think is really key, as well as for all of us as individual partners to think about the ways in which we engage and talk to communities and make sure we get a diversity of voices, which I think we are all doing. I think there's a number of things that we need to do to tackle that, and probably need a clearer statement of intent around it in the LOIP. Laurie?
Thanks, Fiona. Barbara.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Barbara Renton. I'm the Executive Director of Communities for Perth and Kinross Council. So good morning if I've not met you before. I think that Laurie makes a really, really good point, and I'm really, really struck by the fact that in previous documents, we've kind of gone, well, if the action here is on child poverty and that links to action point 1.3.7 in mental health, then we've tried to make those connections that way, and that hasn't always worked. But for me, the bit is, let's just carry on speaking about it. Let's be very, very clear. And as Fiona was talking about the grown-up conversations that we need to have, let's have those conversations, and let's just make sure that nothing falls in the gaps, because we're addressing one point in an action plan someplace and another point someplace else. We know that, as you say, Laurie, that there are very strong links between poverty and mental health. We know that. So let's just keep on working to make sure that we're addressing that, rather than it just being, this is the action for, you know, sort of mental health, or this is the action for poverty. But as I say, I think that that's just part of the ongoing dialogue that a very strong and supportive CPP will bring. I think as well, in terms of the voice, Xander, you've heard me talk fairly recently about the importance of making sure that we're hearing different voices, and really making sure that we're getting to speak to people who live and have those experiences, rather than what we think they might be. And the work that we did with child poverty with Professor John McKeldrick, for example, that was very much about speaking to those people. And Laurie, you've done some work in terms of you know, sort of people, you know, sort of who's, you know, sort of who are not, you know, sort of naturalised, you know, sort of UK citizens as well. So I think that we do have examples of where we are speaking and making, but the important bit is making sure that we're listening and using those real experiences to be able to help us form our direction as well.
Thanks, Barbara. And as I've said, being new to this, I think that every single thing we're talking about in the local outcomes improvement plan, they're all interlinked. You know, every issue is contingent. Another part that's contingent to it. It's like a circular thing that if we manage to help in one area, it's actually going to help in every area. And that may be too simplistic, but it looks to me that a lot of these issues there are all interlinked. And if we can make improvements in one area, will actually help all the way around in that circle. But that's just the way I'm looking at it coming into this very, very new to. I'll go back to Jackie, because it was a comment here, Jackie.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm Jackie Pepper. I'm the new since early May Chief Officer for the Health and Social Care Partnership, and delighted to make the links with this board in terms of strengthening our work across the partnership and in all respects. But I want to pick up on the priority around mental health and wellbeing, because Fiona in her introduction was talking about the feedback from Fiona Lees as independent chair of the Independent Oversight and Assurance Group, appointed by Scottish Government to look into improvements across Tayside in relation to mental health services. And while she was very positive about the various plans and strategies that are being taken forward, she did emphasise being cautious about the plethora of planning that might be there and making that a cluttered and more complicated landscape than it needs to be. And so what that leads me to just add to the conversation is that there is a mental health and wellbeing strategy for the whole of Tayside that was developed and approved. That we do have a local community mental health strategy that's the responsibility of the local health and social care partnership. And I think it would be useful to have an opportunity to have an exploration of that, just enter into the dialogue and the discussion that Barbara was talking about, and to inform the Community Planning Partnership board members about the extent of those strategies understand the work that's already been taken forward, where the responsibility for that work lies. Perhaps identify some of the gaps and be very clear about that role for improving community wellbeing at a very universal level, which the Health and Social Care Partnership can't do on its own. So I was going to suggest under that priority that if with the approval of Community Planning Partnership Board that I would take forward an opportunity for some kind of discussion workshop to explore that, so that we're entering into this forward planning and looking forward in the knowledge of the whole range of work that's already underway and what it's trying to achieve, so that we're not duplicating or creating new gaps as we go forward. So I was going to offer to take responsibility for setting something up around that particular theme.
Thanks very much, Jackie. I'll let members of the board comment on Jackie's proposal there. Probably the first time that anybody's heard it fleshed out in the short time that she's been there. For myself, I find it eminently sensible. We've been in this role a short time within the council and find there is quite a bit of duplication, and everybody needs to focus on things. And the sharper focus we can bring to something, I would be in favour of. But I'm happy to listen to obviously anybody else's views. Even if you agree, say something.
There's some thumbs up I saw digitally.
Should we
Oh, yeah.
agree that as an action?
Okay, so we're happy to agree that with an action, and we'll let Jackie take that forward with the rest of the board. Okay.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. Are there any other questions from members of the board on Deloitte? Just for myself, Fiona, so this work will be ongoing through the recess. Will there be an update coming to the board, which will probably be the major part of business for the meeting on the 9th of September?
Yes.
So that'll be the major part of business. Then it can be revised again.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've been at, we've looked at various different iterations of the LOIP over the last little while, but we are very conscious that change in administration at the council, new members coming onto the board, Dougie's obviously new as well, so there needs to be time over the summer for everybody to satisfy themselves that the plan has the right things in it. I think our proposal would be, and thank you for the discussion, I think what we're taking from it is there are still some areas we need to refine and work on, but that broadly colleagues are happy with the general direction. Our proposal therefore would be that 9th of September meeting would be the final draft. You may want to instruct further changes from that, and you'll obviously, Grant and others would have had time to have a look at it in more detail over the summer. But if we can move to drawing the LOIP to formal agreement by this board and then subsequently by the council, as I've said, so that we can crack on by the end of the year. Something also that the board might want to consider, and we can come back to this in September, is the communications and messaging around the new local outcome improvement plan. I think we're all very aware, I'm certainly very aware, that community planning to the average person on the street can seem a bit of a mysterious and sometimes pointless exercise, but it isn't. And I think, you know, the discussion of the last half an hour hopefully has demonstrated that. But there's probably something that the board will want to do in terms of a press statement, photo opportunity, etc., to launch the new plan and be really clear and upfront about its priorities and what it will be doing on this agenda.
Thanks, Fiona. And although it was in your introduction, you were talking about the administration's priorities. I'm sure that the priorities within that are covered by all the political groups and every elected member, whichever political group they are within Perth and Kinross, and I'm sure Councillor Duff will agree with that. And it's useful that we've got cross-party representation on this board, and we can recommend it to our colleagues. Oh, sorry, John.
No, it's okay, Grant, thanks. No, it was just, I'm obviously, I've got a few things I would like to comment on in the report, not necessarily for the meeting, but just if I've got thoughts. Should any comments come to you, Fiona, or Lee, or who should we direct them to?
You send them to us, John, that's fine. Yeah.
Just to yourself, Fiona and Lee. Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, John. If everybody's happy to move on to the next item, which will be violence against women and girls, and it will be introduced by Laurie.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, first up, a wee disclaimer. As part of our presentation today, we will touch on the issues of coercion, domestic violence and sexual assault. So this content can be triggering. If you wish to turn off your camera or turn off your audio or step away from the discussion, please feel free to do so. So, the back of the tree trunk crunched as I was shoved hard up against it. Slap. The first hit stung my face. Salty tears dripped down my cheek. Silent tears. Shocked by what just happened. And all I did was say no. What followed over the course of the next 4 years, looking back now, seems so absurd. A hellish vision of reality. Patterns began to emerge. Anger, control, violence, apologies, promises, broken. Things escalated and slaps turned to locking me in my flat, a shove to the floor, a punch, bruises, first hidden, but mistakes were made, so then it was a black eye, shouting and crashing, trips to the doctor, absence from work, visits to A&E to check for broken bones, threats to stab me, and I lost who I was. One day a friend told me I needed to get help, and the young woman that he knew and loved was all but gone. That conversation and what happened next was a lifeline. I called Women's Aid. I called Women's Aid. I built up the courage to leave. They believed me, and I began to believe in myself. It took several attempts and many years to be free. I moved town, I started again, and Women's Aid helped restore and empower me. 12 years on, I stand before you today, advocating for violence against women's services in Perth and Kinross. Now, I love books. I devour them when I get the opportunity. Currently, I'm reading The Social Distance Between Us by Darren McGarvey, and he talks about proximity and those with power and influence being far removed from the lived reality of those individuals, those families and communities that they are there to represent. So when it comes to violence against women and girls, I speak with conviction. I know firsthand how organisations like Perthshire Women's Aid and the Rape and Sexual Abuse Centre, Perth and Kinross, I know how they operate and what they do for women. I am one of those women. Only a year ago, I turned once again for help as text and social media barrages made a return. It is as one of those women that I stand here before you today, being vulnerable and authentic, and asking for violence against women and girls to truly be on our collective community planning agenda here in Perth and Kinross. According to the Scottish Government's Equally Safe strategy, the strategy for preventing and eradicating violence against women and girls, violence against women and girls in any form has no place in our vision for a safe, strong, successful Scotland. By this we mean the violent and abusive behaviour carried out predominantly by men directed at women and girls because of their gender. Behaviour that stems from systemic, deep-rooted women's inequality, and which can have immediate and long-term lasting impacts. According to the national and recent statistics from Police Scotland's performance report, sexual crimes were 17% above the 5-year average, and domestic abuse rates were also higher than the 5-year average. So what does this mean locally? You will see from the paper produced by Louise Craig, the manager of Perthshire Women's Aid, and Jen Stewart, the centre manager for RASAC Perth and Kinross, that we have much work to do. And the headlines are startling. RASAC supported 315 women and young people in 2021, providing over 2,300 hours of support. Over at Women's Aid in 21-22, they supported 1,052 cases. While services have historically always felt stretched, even pre-pandemic, COVID-19 has ushered in a greater volume of cases, higher waiting lists, and greater demand for services. Indications for 22-23 show that this is not slowing down. Bearing in mind that this is only based on the number of incidents actually reported. The magnitude of the true picture is not known, but the estimates are that only 16% of victims report domestic abuse and 15% report a sexual crime. So the plausible estimates for Perth and Kinross could mean as many as 8,900 victims of domestic abuse and 1,967 victims of sexual crime live locally, and that really does take your breath away. Both organisations benefited from COVID-19 specific short-term money, but questions of sustainability are very much high on the agenda, with Perthshire Women's Aid and RASAC highlighting the need for more longer-term investment. So what can be done? Why are we bringing this to the Community Planning Board? And what are the asks of these lifeline organisations? Considering the local outcome improvement plan first, I find it startling that our LOIP at present does not reflect the National Equally Safe Strategic Violence Against Women and Girls priorities. We therefore ask the board to agree to recognise its omission to date and ensure its inclusion moving forward. As a survivor, what message does this currently send? We would like to see the inclusion of survivor-led priorities and solutions. And if agreed, we believe it prudent to have an annual review of the relating volumes, outcomes and priorities by the Community Planning Board, cultivating a shared understanding and commitment to an issue which statistically impacts 1 in 5 women in Scotland. More broadly, I believe the Community Planning Partnership could agree to adopt a gendered lens when developing and implementing policy. The Scottish Government's COVID recovery strategy for a fairer future made several references to the inequalities experienced by women, calling for local infrastructure that enables everyone to live well locally. The word gender is rarely referenced in our local outcome improvement plan, and perhaps this is something we should revisit and consider. For RASAC, Perth and Kinross and Women's Aid to not just survive, but to thrive and support more women across Perth and Kinross, they need a commitment to sustained financial support at COVID levels. In a meeting where I was there last week, one of the staff told me that they actually had done a limited amount of awareness raising lately because it would mean that more women would present in a system that was already running at maximum capacity. So to demonstrate that scale of need, Perthshire Women's Aid used a projection tool which stated that in order to meet an increasing waiting list for safety, trauma, counselling and prevention-based services, they would require further investment of £158,194 to recruit 5 full-time domestic abuse practitioners. So finally, the ask of us all, for those of us around the table today, is to engage with and support their teams to participate in an offer of gender-based violence training from Perthshire Women's Aid and RASAC PK, similar to what was discussed at previous meetings in and around poverty. It's a fairly comprehensive wish list, I know, but nothing unrealistic in amongst the clear list of asks that have been presented to us as a collective Community Planning Board. I believe we all have a role to play in ending violence against women and girls and living up to Scotland's ambitions and equally safe vision and priorities. For those of us round the table who are fortunate enough to not need services like Perthshire Women's Aid or RASAC during their lifetime, they may sound like an abstract concept, undoubtedly worthy, but perhaps quite easy to misunderstand. I stand before you today sharing some of my own story on behalf of all the women and girls who know those spaces to be so much more. They are a lifeline, they are a source of empowerment, and a restorer of hope and faith for a safer and kinder future. We, as a community planning partnership, have the opportunity to not only demonstrate our commitment to ending violence against women and girls, but to embody the values of the fair city, making it a fairer and more equal place to live and work for all that reside here. Thank you for listening, and I am happy to take any comments or questions.
Thank you very much. Is that another technical glitch? I hadn't muted. I was muted, etc. So I don't know where that came from, but sorry about that, Laurie. Thank you very much for that powerful presentation. Maybe an understatement even saying that. So I would like to pass it out to the board for any comments from anyone on what you've just heard from Laurie. Barbara.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Laurie, for sharing, sort of what was obviously a very personal experience, and for others, sort of possibly very difficult to hear, but also resonates with other people's lives as well, sort of within the board. So thank you. I think that this is a really strong area where we show collective, sort of responsibility for this. From my experience, often many partners think that additional resources should come straight from the council. But as sort of the previous discussions that we've had, that the police time involved in all of this, sort of in supporting women and girls and other people affected by domestic abuse, and NHS Tayside and the partnership, I think, are all very strong examples of how we can work together better to support this particularly strong area, and happy to work towards that. So thank you, Chair. Thank you, Laurie.
Thanks. Yvonne.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Laurie. It just struck me when you were talking there, we've just launched our local employability challenge fund, and it made me think about our commissioning arrangements for delivery partners and what our ask is of those for any delivery partners receiving funding, I suppose, in a way. How skilled are our practitioners? And you made that point about the level of CPD that practitioners have. And is that something that we can, whilst it's not preventative, support all practitioners who receive any funds within Perth and Kinross, that there is a commitment that practitioners are suitably skilled in terms of supporting women and girls who have experienced any of the issues that you've raised through your presentation? And is that something contractually we can build in across, like we do with fair work principles, for example, or like we do with equality, etc.? So it was just something that struck me that perhaps we need to think about.
Thanks, Yvonne. Yeah, Fiona.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Laurie. And others may want to make comments, but just trying to capture and hopefully in the right way, Laurie, some of the things that you're asked of the board. And I was just writing some notes while you were talking there. In terms of your question about is this issue reflected to the extent it should be within the LOIP? Obviously, we've got, as we've just discussed, the period of time over the summer to think about that. And I think you've raised the broader question already around intersectionality and communities of interest. Of course, Laurie, you're on the CPO, so you've got lots of opportunity to talk to us or continue talking to us, and you've raised this issue at the CPO recently and gave a very powerful presentation with colleagues from RASAC and Women's Aid there as well. So we'll look forward to getting your kind of further input in terms of how you think both the overarching narrative for the LOIC and the action plan may need to be adjusted to reflect the points that you're making. On training, I'll come back to kind of money and joint resourcing, if I may, Chair, but just on training, just a thought, and I know that this is very obvious to all of us, but I mean, it seems to me that the opportunity to do a CPP-wide training and awareness raising programme that everybody around the partnership table has signed up to is something that it's not why would we do it, it's why wouldn't we do it, really, isn't it? But I also wonder if it's something we should be thinking about more broadly beyond just the partnership. And there are many examples of other towns and cities and localities where really effective training has been delivered to staff working in beauty salons, hairdressers, and other places where actually, you know, that may be the only safe place for a woman to talk about her experience and get access to support. And student unions and universities also have lots of examples of good practice. So perhaps we might talk to our colleagues in Perth College or indeed elsewhere in the region about that. On the ask around money, that's not for me to determine, that's for the board to determine. But I suppose my kind of question is, bearing in mind we were just talking about joint resourcing, this is a really obvious example of where the community planning partnership could collectively agree to create a joint pot to focus on this priority. And I just leave that with the board to perhaps reflect on. And that might be one of the first steps that we make towards making joint resourcing part of how we do things around this board table. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks. John.
Thank you. Yeah, sorry, I forgot to introduce myself properly when I spoke before. John Duff, I'm councillor in the Highland Ward in Perth and Kinross and leader of the opposition groups. Yeah, thanks very much, Laurie. That was a very powerful and impassioned address that you gave us. And I think we can see from the comments you made how much this issue touches probably everybody around the table and their specialities, if you like, whether it's the council, the police, the health service, employability and all the other things. So I think that, as has been said by Barbara and by Fiona, kind of lends itself to being an issue that as a community planning partnership we should all invest in, if you like, and because there are issues for all of us round the table that you know, helping to solve this would help in other ways. So I'm certainly very much in favour of conjointly tackling the issue with yourselves in this area. I was interested, just a question, if you like, in terms of your work with children in schools, and is that with boys and girls, and what sort of age group are you involved with there?
So I'm not going to pretend to speak for Jen from RASAC. She's actually currently at Glastonbury, so she has a far different version of what a Friday morning looks like compared to us. But you can see from the report that, yeah, RASAC Perth and Kinross does some incredible work with they have a youth ambassador scheme, which is quite unlike anything that I've ever seen. And even during the Reclaim the Night March, you got to see and kind of feel what that then translated into, that there were so many young women, but also young boys that were present during that march. They're clearly are reaching out and making connections. But in terms of the prevention service, which delivers those workshops to young people in secondary schools and community settings, they currently engage with more than 5,000 young people annually, according to the stats from RASAC. Following that, the referral rates for young survivors increased significantly, leading to the development and the launch of their dedicated Young People and Families project. So there's a strong acknowledgement from RASAC and from Women's Aid that prevention is key to addressing this issue longer term. But that obviously conflicts with the reality of the crisis that's presenting itself through the door on a daily basis at the same time. But yeah, there's an incredibly strong prevention work underway.
And is that an area that also needs additional support?
I would imagine so.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, John. Jackie, is that a historic hand, or is this on this issue? Okay, I'll take it as a historic hand.
Oh, sorry, no. Sorry, I'd forgotten to unmute. Sorry, it's a new hand. Yes.
Okay, right.
Sorry.
Thanks.
And just to say thanks, Laurie, for making us sit up or stand up and listen to your very powerful presentation, and thank you for just expressing your personal experience, which is a very brave thing to do, so thank you. I suppose my question is about the fact that we have a Violence Against Women partnership which sits within the public protection arrangements, and we have a Chief Officers Group for Public Protection, and Thomas currently chairs that. So I just wonder, in terms of some of the requests that you've been making, whether that has come through those channels too, because I'm not aware of that. But really just to kind of make that point that we have the community planning partnership here, but there are current partnership structures for planning our response and preventative response as well to violence against women. So it's really just to make sure that some of the things that you've been saying and the requests that flow from that are being shared in those forums too.
Yeah, when it comes to the Violence Against Women and Girls partnership, we've spoken with Jennifer McComish in terms of the coordinator when we started to plan these discussions and kind of what we were going to present several months ago. I think it highlights a question around what is the link and how is the information or the challenges that are presenting at the Violence Against Women partnership coming here to the CPP. I don't know whether there's something that we need to look at in terms of strengthening the links, or whether it's an issue of siloed working where violence against women and girls is kind of dealt with in a partnership off to the side, whereas actually it's a collective issue. So that I think for me there's a question there around the linkages within the already kind of crowded architecture that we have, and whether that representation is strong enough here at this community planning level.
Thanks. And thanks, Lauren, and I'm sure you'll continue to work over the recess, or the recess for the council, but not for yourselves probably, with officers, and look forward to getting more update and information cascading down to us as well. So thanks for that. If Graham doesn't mind, we'd like to just swap the agenda and have an update from Chris Lamont, please, on mental health and wellbeing, because Chris has got to attend another meeting. So hopefully you don't mind, Graham, and we'll go to Chris now for his update.
Thanks, Chair. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, nods. So I'm going to be very brief, because obviously Jackie has already come in earlier in the proceedings and suggested that we have a dedicated workshop around mental health and wellbeing. But I suppose really what I can do is I can just provide a very clear overview as to what's happening from a Tayside perspective and what we're doing from a local HSCP perspective, and how that ties in with current government recommendations and what's happening on the ground, if people are okay. I'll probably be no more than 5-10 minutes, because like's already been suggested, I actually need to dive off and go to an NHS Tayside meeting at the same time. So Dr. David Strang came to Tayside back in 2018, late 18, following some significant issues that had been highlighted to him regarding inpatient services at NHS Tayside. On the back of that, he undertook a thorough investigation for approximately a 12 to 13 month period, which culminated in him releasing the Trust and Respect report in February 2020. On the back of the Trust and Respect report, which is all these documents are openly accessible online to the general public. So on the back of the Trust and Respect report, NHS Tayside then commissioned a strategic planning group around the implementation of their own Tayside-wide mental health and wellbeing strategy, which they've subsequently titled Living Life Well. And for anybody that wants to read it, it's 137 pages long, and it's better than probably some hypnotic medication to put you to sleep. There were 51 recommendations that came out of Dr. Strang's Trust and Respect report, which have subsequently now formed the action plan, which from a Tayside perspective, we are looking to address. And the action plan is now known as Listen, Learn, Change. And again, more than happy to circulate out the actual recommendations within the Listen, Learn, Change. Out of the 51 recommendations, 49 of those are specific to Tayside. 2 of them are national recommendations. And they have broken down the recommendations into 4 clear categories. So 1 is around patient safety, 1 is around integration, 1 is around workforce, and 1 is around communication and engagement. And the Scottish Government have subsequently, since round about September of last year, parachuted in what's known as an oversight group, which are currently going around the whole of NHS Tayside and associated partners, and undertaking scrutiny of how we are developing and evolving and transforming some of those actions within the Listen, Learn, Change action plan. And they met with Fiona and David just a couple of weeks ago when they were actually visiting Perth and Kinross as part of our oversight visit at the time. We, from a perspective of Perth and Kinross, we were working in the background at the end of 2019 anyway in regards to our own mental health and wellbeing strategy, because the previous incarnation had actually come to an end. So we rolled up our sleeves, we started to get stuck in around some communication and engagement and trying to find out exactly what our local communities were looking for. And then the big bad COVID came over the hill and took the wheels off a little bit. So we continued to keep working. We engaged with over 300 people across P&K, and subsequently we have devised our own mental health and wellbeing strategy, which runs parallel to the Living Life Well strategy for Tayside. But you'll be pleased to hear it is realistically only 47 pages long, and most of that is an actual action plan at the back end of it, which shows very clearly what we want to outline. And again, that's open out there. It's out in the public domain. That was subsequently signed off at our IGB on the 1st of December just last year. So we're six months into this iteration of our mental health and wellbeing strategy. It's a 3-year plan. So at that point, I'm probably going to stop giving you an overview, but the request, I think, which came more specifically from the CPP was around how CPP can support the implementation of the actions within our mental health and wellbeing strategy, which I think is probably more pertinent to what we can discuss at a much wider workshop that Jackie's obviously already suggested takes place. Now, there are some clear recommendations within our own action plan, within our own Perth and Kinross strategy, which I think personally, but I'm only a lone voice here, would be very pertinent to what the CPP can support us with. We have a strategic oversight group in Perth and Kinross known as the Mental Health and Wellbeing Strategy Group, which I chair, and we have a variety of different organisations and partners that sit on that group and are taking away specific actions within the actual mental health and wellbeing strategy. And some of those partners will probably be involved, or I'm sure they will be involved, across a variety of different forums and a variety of different platforms as well. So obviously we're trying to make sure that it all dovetails into one clear action that we want to take forward on behalf of the communities across Perth and Kinross. But I am happy to answer any questions at this moment in time.
Thanks. I think we've got a question from Emma, please.
Thanks, Chair. Colleagues, my name is Emma Fletcher, I'm Director of Public Health NHS Tayside. It was more a point of accuracy, if you don't mind, for the minutes. My understanding was the Strang was not, Dr. Strang was not commissioned for NHS Tayside inpatient services specifically. It was about the provision of mental health services across Tayside. I've put the excerpt.
You've gone on to mute, Emma.
Gone to mute. Sorry. Did you catch any of that?
We got the first bit.
The first bit.
Yeah.
So it's just a point of accuracy with regards for the minutes and the initial commissioning of the report and the independent inquiry. So I put that in the chat for inclusion and reference. Thank you.
Thanks, Emma.
Yep, thanks, Emma. Thank you for that. Do we have any other questions? Jackie, your hand is still up there, and I don't know if it's historic or another new one. I think we'll go to Barbara.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Chris. I think that it's maybe not a question. Councillor Lang is probably, sort of a comment. The council approved on Wednesday a consultation process in relation to our culture and leisure strategies. And I think that, we are really, really keen to see, sort of those two as part of a preventative approach in terms of mental health and well-being as well. So as part of the workshop that we'd agreed to, or as part of the consultation that we're doing and how we commission services in the future, then, sort of very keen to make those links to the Perth and Kinross mental health and well-being strategy that you've spoken about.
Thanks, Barbara. Yes, it was brought forward because not just as preventative, but also to assist in recovery. Both mental health and wellbeing. We feel that culture and sports, like culture and leisure, is very important in that regard. Thanks. Any other questions? No. Well, thank you very much, Christopher, for that verbal update, and it is again something that the administration and the whole of elected members in Perth and Kinross are taking very seriously. It's going to be one of our main priorities in our corporate plan moving forward. So thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, John.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. It was just if we could take up Christopher's offer to share the current version of I forget what the learn, change, whatever the document.
I can send that to you. Yeah, no problem. I'll send it to Lee.
Partnership. Yeah, thanks.
Thanks. Thanks, John. Graham, come back to you if you're still here. I know that you have another meeting to go to as well. So thanks for letting me vary the agenda.
No, thank you, Chair. For those that don't know me, my name's Graham Binney. I'm Superintendent for Partnerships and Performance across Tayside. I think the action was for a verbal update. This came as an ask at previous boards and executive groups. And I suppose it's fallen with the police, but part of my point is that I only know a small amount of the picture in terms of hate crime. But to just briefly update the board, what the police figures tell us about hate crime is our occurrence rates are slightly above last year. There's a bit of variance across Tayside, but probably more significantly, the occurrence rates for hate crime are above our 5-year average. So I think it's probably no surprise to all of the board, because I think we all feel that some behaviours have changed over the last couple of years. But those figures probably only portray a little bit of a sort of a portion of the picture, because there's a lot of context to them. We have instances where there are crimes with multiple victims. Police officers are regularly victims of hate crime, which isn't okay. But I suppose my point is there's a lot that we don't know. the police figures are what we do know, and some of the grey areas, I suppose, at the moment are a bit of clarity for our communities what hate crime is, routes for reporting, the efficiency of the criminal justice system as a whole to deal with hate crime, which, and I suppose as a whole partnership there's probably work to do, particularly about the voice of lived experiences we've heard before around violence against women and girls, and I think that the police have got improvements to do in getting that lived experience and engaging with seldom heard communities, because there are barriers traditionally and ongoing with engagement with police in some parts of Scotland. So where we are at the moment in terms of policing, it's that hate crime features as one of our actions on our equality and diversity and inclusion plan. But at the moment, without knowing who is most in need of support, I suppose what we're left with is just taking bite-sized chunks and doing a little of everything at the moment. So my position, and leading to probably an endorsement or support from the board, is that we need to probably work as a partnership in figuring out where that support is needed, whether it's resource or support or money, and particularly with the scarce resources we have, and direct that support into the right place. So again, without replicating what was suggested with mental health, I don't know if we have a forum to do that at the moment. So perhaps either on a one-off basis or an ongoing basis, we can establish that forum and try and figure out as a partnership where our resources need to be directed. So that's probably my position at the moment, and I'm quite happy to develop that with probably, I think, will be the quality lead for the local authority and with Laurie and team particularly. But it's very much on our agenda at the moment, and there are things we have to do, and I think we could do those better together. So that's probably my position, Chair, that the figures only tell us one side of the story, and we need to figure out what we don't know at the moment from a policing perspective, and perhaps the partnership can assist with that.
Thanks very much, Graham. Fiona, do you have a comment on what Graham was saying about the way of setting up a sort of joint committee?
I do. I probably want to reflect on that and take some views from others. And I think it's a bit like the comment that Jackie made vis-a-vis violence against women and girls. We do have a community safety partnership. We do have an equalities forum where I know this issue, has been raised quite regularly in the past. So bearing in mind what we were all saying earlier on about not making the landscape more complicated, I suppose we would probably want to be assured that there was a genuine need for a new route, Graham, or whether we need to adjust the remit and role of some of our existing forums in order to deal with this issue properly. But I do take your point about we've probably only got one side of the picture in terms of data and evidence, and therefore, how are we gathering data and evidence and using it collectively as a partnership to make the right decisions?
Fiona, can I just comment? I agree with you. I'm not a fan of setting up groups for the sake of it. If there's something that can be adjusted or accommodate that ask, or a little bit of extra examination of data. So I'll take guidance from yourselves about that equalities forum, because I don't know enough about it at the moment. So perhaps with a little bit of adjustment that could help us answer the questions we need to know.
Thanks very much. Are there any other comments or questions for Graham?
Laurie.
Oh, I can just see your hand on the edge of the screen, Laurie, so sorry, missed it.
No, you're fine. Just to say, yeah, I fully support what Graham is saying. I think we do need to look at it, and I do think we need to look at it as a collective. My concern is that if we push it off to the Equality Strategic Forum, it becomes just an equalities issue, where actually is, I think that this is something that impacts the communities, the individuals and the families that we're all here to serve. And as someone who sits on that forum and has sat in many of those conversations, not a lot has come out of it. So I think we need to get to the point where we're doing some kind of collective action and looking at the stats that came out. I think we need to have some really open and honest and difficult conversations with ourselves about what our hate crime stats are telling us, the racialised figure in particular is quite startling in terms of the differences and the jumps. And I know it's not comparative, but as a Carnoustie resident, if I look at in comparison to where Angus is at, the racialised figures are in particular a bit of a concern. And so I agree. I think we are only getting one part of the story when we look at just the stats, because similar to the question around violence against women and girls, who's not reporting and what are the issues in getting to that point, and how do we make that more inclusive and more accessible? My experience of working in a Muslim women's organisation prior to coming to Perth and Kinross is that reporting of hate crime is a challenge in itself, and it's about whether people have the trust and the faith for how that is then handled and processed. But I think it is an issue that affects all the communities and individuals and families that we're here to serve. And I agree, we don't want to add to existing architecture that's already complex and cluttered, but we do need to have an effective way of addressing this that isn't just about equalities. Agree, that's at the core, but this is something much wider and larger.
Okay, thanks, Laurie.
Barbara's put a recommendation in the chat.
Yeah. Has everybody got access in the chat? Yes. Barbara's put a suggestion in the chat, which seems sensible. So thanks. We'll move on to item 8, which is any emerging strategic issues. There'll be none notified in advance of the meeting, but if anybody has anything that they wish to raise now, they can raise them now. Don't see anything coming in. So any other business at all from anyone? No other business, thanks. So the proposed dates for the next meetings, although there'll be work ongoing up until that point, it's Friday the 9th of September and then Friday the 18th of November, when we'll adopt formally the new plan. I think, well, it's really out for the board to decide if we want to continue with either physical or hybrid options, and wondering if any partners would like to host the meeting at any time, and also if they want to be hosted in different communities across Perth and Kinross. And if that was the case, community groups from that area could be invited along, including the local action partnerships, to take part in the discussions. But just throw that out to the members of the board to see what they think. Yeah, I know. It may be just too soon to make a decision now or to think just now, but you could maybe send what you think about where and how we should hold these future meetings to Lee. Sorry, Lee, that's more work for you. Yep. Just definitely not to me. Send it to Lee, and we can look at that going forward. So I'd just like to thank everybody coming along. I was really pleased to see the turnout and all these different agencies represented here. I think starting off on that foot of full attendance shows a willingness that everybody has got to actually achieve something and work together. So thanks very much for everybody for attending. Have a nice day and good weekend.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.